Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Smart Muslima podcast. My name is Farhat Amin and I'm your host. Inshallah, today I'm going to be speaking about child sexual abuse and why it's so important for the Muslim community, for Muslim parents, Muslim teachers, youth workers, anyone who's with children basically, that we need to talk about this more. And the way I'm going to be speaking about is that it's the way to protect and prevent our children from being abused. Now, I know we can't eliminate sexual abuse. However, teaching our children how to recognise and prevent it, along with early intervention, can create a lasting positive impact for future generations. Now, I want you to think about when you were growing up, that did anyone speak to you about child abuse and sexual abuse in particular? In the UK, it wasn't spoken about openly for a very long time. And I would say the 60s and 70s, it wasn't spoken about. And it's interesting that there were certain personalities, whether it's Jimmy Savile and a whole host of other quite famous people who have come out as being paedophiles that were found out to be. But what they were doing was hidden, it was covered up, people knew that it was going on, but they were given access to children. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg. There's also, if you think about in the Catholic Church, the big scandals that have now come to light about how institutionally children were abused by Catholic priests and others involved in the Catholic Church. And this is all available to see, on Google. You can Google it, you can go on Wikipedia, you can find out all about it. But one of the things the biggest thing is that children didn't know what child abuse was. They didn't know they were being sexually abused. They didn't know they could go and talk to anyone. They were threatened. They were intimidated. They were physically harmed, into silence. And so one of the biggest ways to protect children and help them is to educate them about sex in an age-appropriate manner. And in my latest book, which is called Sex Education for Muslim Kids, A Guide for Muslim Parents, the whole reason, one of the biggest reasons I've wanted to write this book is because I see, as having grown up in the Muslim community, having been a teacher, having witnessed and seen and heard stories from my friends, whether it was in the UK or when they would go abroad, that how widespread child abuse is. But in the Muslim community, it's not spoken enough about, and therefore children are not being protected. And I think that we need to learn from the mistakes of the Catholic Church. We need to learn from the mistakes of wider society, how they have woken up to the importance of talking about child abuse. And now you will have it there. One of the groundbreaking organisations was called Childline. It was by Esther Ranson. She started it, and it still exists. It's a phone line that children could call and tell that they were being abused, whether it was physical, emotional, or sexual. And then it could be, they could be protected. The police could get involved. And I think one of the things I know that prevents parents or aunties and uncles or teachers talking about this is that they think that if you teach children about sex and relationships, you're going to take away their innocence. I've had these conversations with many parents that they think, I don't want to introduce stuff to them at an early age, and then they will want to experiment, or they will lose their innocence, and they will be thinking about this and it will corrupt them. Now, let's just stop and look at the world we're living in. We all know we are living in a hypersexualized society that has no problem sexualizing children for the purpose of profit, and also just for the purpose of I'm going to call them perverted individuals, people who want access to children and want them to be sexualized at a young age. So now that's the world we're living in. As carers of children, how are we going to protect our children from people like that? That's the question we need to ask ourselves. And what does Islam say about it? How can we protect our children, safeguard them, and prepare them for the world they're living in? As parents, we protect our children from physical dangers very well. So we'll teach them how to cross the road, check for cars, don't play with matches. There's lots of things, just relating to danger. And even this idea of stranger danger is very at the forefront of our mind. We will tell them about these things. However, when it comes to abuse, when we haven't thought about it as much, and we have to, that's what I'm saying, because the number of children that are abused is astronomical, frankly. And when I was doing research for my book, I'm just going to give you some stats, just so you're aware. Child abuse is underreported, especially amongst boys. We always think of girls being abused, but boys are abused just as much, and it's underreported because they feel an extra layer of shame. Because I think they're sodomized. They're told to, I'm sorry if there's children around, please don't listen to this on loud volume with children. They're made to do certain physical things that are so disgusting to them, and it affects them as much as girls, but they're not allowed to speak about it. So honestly, we don't know exactly how many children in the UK and US experience sexual abuse. Now, I'm just thinking of the US and UK, and I'll give you stats. However, research suggests that 1 in 20 children in the UK have been sexually abused. Data reveals almost 87,000 sexual offences against children were recorded by police in 2022 to 2023. Types of offences include rape, sexual assault, grooming, and sexual exploitation. The highest number of crimes where age was known were against 11 to 15-year-olds. Now, those statistics are from the NSPCC, that's a children's charity. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Just think of how many never talk about it. I know people who've been abused who've never reported it, who've never spoken about it, and I'm sure you do as well. Now, in the US, the child abuse rate has risen to 32% for girls and 11% for boys. That's statistics from the University of New Hampshire. Now, that's just, I could give you lots more stats, but I think you get the idea, and I think you know that it's underreported. And when it comes to Muslim children and abusers who are Muslim, because that's what I'm interested in talking about here, is basically child abusers come in many forms: male or female, relatives in the home, extended family, teenagers, cousins, family, friends, and teachers in school or madrasa. And as well as that, parents. Parents can also abuse their children. Let's just be, I think we're all aware of that. But again, that's not something that people want to talk about. So there is this added layer. And I don't want to exaggerate. I don't want to make you think, oh, this is such a big problem and everyone could be a potential abuser. No, that's not how we think about it. We don't catastrophize the whole situation. We just deal with it, and we don't stick our heads in the sand. So these are all people who, when you read up about who are abusers, it could be could be anyone. However, majority of the time, it's someone the child knows. Okay, and one of the things to have Muslim child abusers who know a victim comes from a strict family who does not talk about shameful things will weaponize ideas of shame to blame them. And that's really, that predators are very sneaky, they're very clever, and they will observe children with their parents, they will observe families and see, how can I get a way in here? And sometimes they'll get a way in by, it will be a family friend or an uncle who will use their children. They will say to the parents, oh, let them come and have a sleepover at our house. Or say to the child, invite your cousin or invite your friend round for a sleepover. And so then you as an unsuspecting parent I think, yeah, they're a family friend. They're with the children. They're a parent. They're a good parent. They could be, they could be Islamic for all you know. And that's how. But once they are in their home, that's how they gain access. So this myth of this stranger who's wearing a coat and will try to grab your child, that is not what child abusers are. They will be someone you know. So now so you can't watch your child 24/7, can you? No one can. They have to go to school. And just on the issue of school, when I was at primary school, there was a teacher, and he abused quiet boys and South Asian boys, but to be honest, there were English boys as well. But he would target quiet boys who he knew would not tell their parents, who they would not be what's the word, confrontational with him, would not say no to him, and he would use his position of power. He was the choir music teacher, and so he would have choir. He was in charge of the library. He used to abuse boys in the library, so he would pick children to be his librarians, and again, having favourites, and then they would stay behind to do work with him, or they would come early to do things for him, and that's when he would abuse them. And at the school I was at, he was my class teacher. At the school, what would happen is suddenly boys would just leave, and you think, oh, what happened to so and so? He's just left. But it was because the parents wouldn't. Maybe they did try to speak to the school, but I think in many cases they would just leave, take the kid out of the school because they didn't know what else to do, and they wanted to protect the child. But he knew those kids had zero education about what is safe touch, what is unsafe touch, what is acceptable, what's inappropriate, and what is sexual and behaviour to a child. So can you see? So that was just one experience. I had another teacher who, when they went, I wasn't allowed to go on a camping trip, and I thank Allah that my dad was strict and didn't allow me to. But my friends who went on the camping trip, they said the teachers got drunk and the teacher was trying to get the girls to come into their tent. Now, okay, this was in the 90s, early 90s. However, that doesn't matter. It was on a trip away from home, away from their parents, away from safety. And what could children do? And the thing is, thank God, my friends, they were intelligent enough to know they kept to themselves. They didn't go into the tent with those teachers because only Allah knows what would have happened to them. But on these away trips, these are really dangerous situations. Everyone thinks teachers are so good. They've got their CRB. I'm telling you now, I've worked with teachers for many years. They are nothing special. They're just your average guy and girl, and they just happen to be working in a school. They are not morally better. They are not, just because they've got authority. Some will use their authority, and I've seen it, to flirt with girls. I worked at high school, and I saw teachers flirting with girls, and these are Muslim girls. I saw one teacher actually had an affair with a girl in year 11. And then it was found out. Another teacher at my daughter's school, and I met him again. He was Muslim, and he was a maths teacher, and he had been going online and contacting kids, and then again he was jailed. So there were so many cases of teachers being child abusers. But when you get the teacher training, and when the school talks about child abuse, they won't say, oh, your teacher could potentially be an abuser. They will never say that, even though there are so many of them. And I really don't think they take kids' safety and safeguarding seriously at all. Teachers do not tell on other teachers when they see inappropriate behaviour. One of the biggest, predators I worked with was the head of English at a high school I worked in, and he was like the really popular teacher. He would do after school classes, and he was let all the kids come to his room, and he would be fine with kids like kissing and doing stuff in his room. I remember it being it was the first placement I went to, and I found the whole thing so troubling, but I couldn't tell anyone because I was an NQT, and I kept thinking, no, do other teachers not see this really odd behaviour? But the thing that he would do is he would put his arm around the girls, he would put his hand on their knee, it was like an open secret that he would touch the girls. And I reported him after I left the school, because he was also a bully. He used to bully the other teachers, and he bullied me. Um, but again, it was an open secret. Kids used to make jokes about it. And why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because that's just me as one teacher, what I observed, and as a child, what I observed. And it's just kind of make you realize the world is full of some really nasty people who will take advantage of children. But the thing that the type of children they will not take advantage of are the ones that have been taught about boundaries, who have been taught about inappropriate touching, who are loud, who will say no to them, who will go and tell their parents. And that's kind of child you want to raise. And you can do that by keeping your child's innocence. You don't want them to be scared and fearful of everyone. But in the book, I go through, there's a whole chapter dedicated to this because there's a lot to talk about, but just the importance of teaching your children and having conversations about sexual abuse. And what I have included are scripts for you, because parents don't know what to say. I didn't know what to say. When I think about it, when I was raising my children, I thought the world was not so bad. And I don't think I talked to my kids enough, because what I'll tell you, one of my kids, the school they went to, the head teacher was homosexual. And when he would teach, he would go really close to the boys, and unnecessarily close. And the thing is, just imagine that your head teacher is doing that. How do you react? What do you do? My son did say, he goes, some of us would push him back a bit, not allow him to get so close to him. But others wouldn't know what was going on. And so can you see, it's these are the kind of things, that the conversations we need to have with our children, that you don't allow, whether it's a Quran teacher, whether it's a normal teacher, whether it's a tutor, whether it's someone online, teaching your kids about what kind of things should they not be talking to you about, what's inappropriate, not being too friendly with them. You should respect them as a teacher, as in they're teaching you stuff. But it doesn't mean if they start to say things to you that make you uncomfortable, they need to tell you that. And so therefore it's important that you have a good relationship with your kids. That's really important. If you're so strict with them, that they can't tell you anything, and they think, if I tell my mum or dad something, they're just going to shout at me, they're going to blame me. Even if their kid does make a mistake, which they will, but they do have to know that you have got their back. I'll tell you something funny. This isn't related to child abuse, but I had said to my son, if anyone ever bullies you, you have permission to beat them back. Don't start a fight, but don't let anyone bully you, and you can finish it. And he knew, so therefore he knew, if anyone did anything to him, and the school called me, I would be there, and I would not be telling him off. I would hear what he had to say, and I would back him up. And that's what a kid needs. They need to know that my parent will back me up, especially when it comes to these things. And the only way that will happen is if you talk to them about things. And it's not as hard as you think. It can seem really overwhelming, and thinking, oh my God, what do I say? How do I start? What do I do? And that's the whole reason I've written the book, is to help you with that. What kind of questions, how do you answer questions your children have? How do you spot red flags when it comes to potential groomers, people wanting to spend too much time with your child? And one of the things I'll say is that one of the reasons why we can end up giving access to people, to our children, is that when we are too busy, when we are too tired, when we're working too much, and this isn't any kind of criticism of working mothers or working dads, but we have to take the responsibility of protecting our children pretty seriously. Really, it's really just to get them up to the age where they're 16, 17, where they are, they're old enough to speak up for themselves, and they've learned, okay, who's a good guy, how to judge who's a good person, who's a bad person, who is potentially going to harm me. That's what you want to help them, because no one's saying wrap them up in cotton wool. But if you put this time in now, you will um, um, you will not regret it. You'll have raised a child who is savvy, who is strong, who knows, okay, again, how to protect themselves. And even as then an adult, when they're looking at when they're going to get into relationships, when it comes to marriage, because that can happen. Abuse can continue in marriages. But if you've raised a child who understands about sexual abuse, and how it's nowhere, has no room in Islam at all. It's a massive sin. No one is allowed to physically, emotionally, sexually harm you. That will set them up for adulthood. And alhamdulillah, you will get the reward for that. I think we have to reframe. And I talk about reframing quite a lot in the book, about reframing how we view, navigating sex education, that it's not a burden to teach a child about this. It's actually an opportunity to shift your mindset and embrace it as a way to help, foster a healthy, positive attitude in your children, which is the way of the Sunnah. The world was very different at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It wasn't as hypersexualized as in so many avenues. But it wasn't, you still had sexual predators. And the Prophet, through the Sunnah and alhamdulillah, through revelation of the Quran, we are given in society how to behave, how to protect ourselves, how to desexualize interactions between men and women. And when you learn about it, and I've written about it in the book, it really makes you think about how it's, how Allah, the rules that Allah has given us are there to protect our children, to protect ourselves. And, just as for example, like I mentioned, not allowing your child to have sleepovers. Having sleepovers is not a human right. I wasn't allowed to, and I thank Allah a million times that my parents didn't allow me to. And it's interesting, I've watched a couple of videos where you have parents. There's one particular video which really struck me, where a parent, he was an American dad, he was African American dad, and he was saying how today his daughter, as he was saying in the video, she was like 16 or 17. All her life, when she was young, her parents said, "You are not having sleepovers," and she hated it. She in particular, she used to really hate on her mum and how you're ruining my life and it's not fair and all my friends can have sleepovers and you're so strict. And then once she was 16, then the parents said, okay, you are old enough, like you can have a sleepover. She goes to a sleepover with her friends and she says to her friends, oh, finally I'm allowed to go to my sleepover. And my parents, they were like cave people and so strict. They weren't even religious, by the way. And then her friend said to her that you are so lucky that your parents didn't allow you to go to sleepovers. And then they went on to tell her about the different ways in which they'd been molested, they'd been abused, the amount of trauma they had having gone to people's houses, and whether it was some male relative, whether it was the father, the brother, a cousin, who, in the middle of the night just did something to them or got them in a room on their own, and how they never told anyone. And then, having heard that, she then went back to her parents and thanked them. And the father was making the video saying, I'm shocked. My daughter has actually thanked me for not allowing her to go to sleepovers. And I thought, look at this. This just makes so much sense. So, the idea of not being alone with a non-mahram in Islam, it says the third person there will always be shaitan. And again, that rule alone, if we stuck by that rule, we could protect ourselves from potential abuse. I'm not saying it will, like I said, it won't eliminate it. There's ways that things can still happen. But there's also another really strong thing we need to do is doing our protection du'as, teaching our children protection du'as. That when we are not with them, they know that Allah is protecting them and they rely on Allah to do that. When I think this is a really important point, that when we go abroad to visit family, a number of stories I've heard of people where just random or even blood relatives hugging girls and feeling them up, or the parents allowing their children to just go with these relatives, to go to the shops, to go to their house, and just because they knew them when they were growing up. Now, it might not, that relative might not be the problem, but anyone else who's in that house has access to your child now. And I think back to when I used to go to Pakistan, I was allowed to go to stay over at people's houses or be with people, and anyone could have done anything to me. And I feel quite, with my children, I didn't allow that. I thought, you're not. I was much more cautious, and I think it's better to be cautious, but it doesn't mean that you don't let them go out anywhere. They have to go to madrasa, or they have to have a teacher who teaches them Quran. They have to go to school. These are all, but please don't think that I'm telling you to live in fear and be suspicious of everyone. What I'm telling you to do, and I reiterate it in the book and teach you how to do this, is educate your child. If you're a teacher, educate the students. I don't know how much Islamic schools talk about this. I don't know whether Islamic organisations have safeguarding. Anyone who has contact with children, are they being taught this? Are they teaching the children this? That it might seem counterintuitive that you're saying you cannot trust even the teachers at this school, but there is a way to, if you teach kids what is appropriate, what's inappropriate, they will then be able to see, okay, that man or that woman is not behaving correctly, and I know who I should go and tell. Because that's the key. Who do they go and tell? Who is the trusted adults in their life? There need to be a few. And unfortunately, like I said, because we know parents can abuse their children, there have to be people outside the family. So whether that's, again, who the trusted adults are, whether that's their nani, whether that's their dadi, whether it's their khala, there need to be people who outside the family, and so this is the conversations we need to be having with our own family, and they're uncomfortable conversations. I know that's why we don't have them. But just please, just think, you just going through a bit of an uncomfortable conversation is a million times better than your child being abused. That's the way I see it. So inshallah, may Allah protect all our children. May Allah give us the strength to have these conversations. And just because we didn't have it when we were growing up, that's what people think. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it now. The world has changed. We have to adapt. We have to get better with our parenting. We can't pass the buck. That's because on the Day of Judgment, Allah will ask us, what did you do? And so rather than just feeling guilty after something has happened, do something now. And whether there are a lot of resources out there, but I did find that there was such a need to have a book. And my book's called Sex Education for Muslim Kids, a Muslim Parent's Guide. So you don't give the book to your child. It's for you to read. It's for teachers to read. It's for youth workers to read. It's for imams to read. And do something with this information. I wonder how many khutbahs have been on the subject of child abuse. I don't know, because I don't go to Jummah, I don't know, but I wish there were more. I hope there will be more, inshallah. And so, yeah, so like I said, inshallah, may Allah protect all our children. And I'd love to know what you think. You can email me, hello@farhatamin.com. You can follow me on Instagram, farhatamin_UK. And the book is available on Google Play Books, on Amazon as well. And I hope in bookshops, Muslim bookshops soon. I'd love it to get into Muslim bookshops very soon. And if you'd like more information, you can visit my website, smartmuslima.com. Inshallah, take care, and I will speak to you again soon.